The minor major chord, also known as that strange chord in between minor and major. It sounds kind of dissonant. Or by the end of this video, hopefully, that interesting chord that will add a lot of depth to your improvisations and compositions. So let's get right into it. What is a minor major chord? Well, as the name suggests, it's something in between minor and major. What do I mean precisely by that? Well, if you look at the chord, we have a minor third, then we have the fifth, and the very interesting fact, the major seventh. If you notice, if we just play a normal major chord, we'll have major third, fifth, major seventh. However, if we play a minor seventh chord, we'll have minor third and minor seventh. So why does the minor major chord have such a special sound? Main idea is that it just includes the major seventh, which is one semitone away from the root. This adds a lot of tension. And if you notice, we also have our flat third augmented chord. Here, B flat augmented, which adds a lot of tension and a very interesting texture. So this is a very interesting chord. It is admittedly quite complicated, so how could we construct it? Given an arbitrary tonality, we want to play a minor major chord. How would we do this? Well, there's basically two ways of going about this. You can either start with the major chord or with the minor chord. Let's start with the major chord. You just play your standard major seventh chord, and then you turn it somewhat minor by playing the flat third instead. The other approach would be just the opposite. We start with the minor seventh chord and we change it to arrive at the minor major chord. This would just be changing the seventh. Of course, we are not going to stay in C major all the time. It's good to practice in other keys. So let's do another example together. If we play E minor 7, what do we have to change here in order to get our minor major chord? Well, we've got minor, major. We add the sharp 7. So once again, we have E minor major. Of course, the voicing I just showed is kind of awkward, and there are other ways to go about it, which could sound a lot better in your improvisations. I'm going to show you two voicings in particular. A closed voicing, which would be the first one on my slide. You could play this on only your left hand, and improvise on your right hand. And then we have an open voicing, which would be more adequate for accompanying other instrumentalists, which would sound like this. Before getting into how we could use it in our own improvisations, let's have a quick look at a very famous example of the minor major chord in jazz. This is in Solar, a standard by Miles Davis. So if you look at the lead sheet, it's quite interesting. We don't really get that minor major chord explicitly written. However, the first chord we see is a triad, which is something you don't really see in jazz that often. If you look at the melody, however, look at that second note. It's B flat. So, in essence, we're just playing C minor and adding B flat, which is just our minor major chord. So how would this sound like? Let's now get into the use cases. The example we just looked at is what I like to call an implicit minor major. In fact, this is how I would personally prefer to use this chord in most of the situations. To be more specific, the way I like to play this is in a minor 2-5-1, where I actually play the minor first, add 6. The The second use case would be in order to create a special texture. This would also be very useful in compositions and even in classical music. Another way we could use the minor major chord is through substitutions. We could use it instead of a major chord, instead of a minor chord, and even, in a certain sense, instead of a dominant chord. This last one is the most subtle of the three, and we will look exactly how I would use it. So let's first have a look at a substitution with a major chord. To be more precise, I'm also going to play a 2-5-1. Then the second round, I'm going to play the minor major chord in order to add an element of surprise to my improvisation. I have already showed you how this would work with the minor substitution when I played an example for the implicit minor major. So we are now going to look at the last option, which would be dominant. To be more specific, doesn't really work as a dominant chord in the technical sense. I like to call it a dominant substitution because dominant chords really have the function of tension and release. Here, the tension and release is caused, as I said earlier, by the seventh note, which is one semitone away from the root. So, what you could play is, for example, C minor and C minor major as a kind of dominant. Let's see how this would sound. The last use case of minor major chords is the same as with augmented and diminished chords, which are other dissonant special chords, just as passing chords. This means you just play them usually on the offbeat to add some harmonic interest to your music, although they don't really form part of the chord progression per se. Before we get into some of the more advanced aspects of the minor major chord, let's look at an exercise that you could use to practice. So what we will be doing is, you take your favorite chord progression, and from time to time you just swap the root chord with the minor major chord. Let's have a look at how this would sound with this chord progression. That was very good and all, but there are many more things we can do with the minor major chord. First of all, since we're playing jazz, the first thing you must always ask when you're learning a new chord is, can I add even more notes on top of it? Of course you can. You can just add the ninth. How would this sound like? If you've noticed during my improvisations, I've already played this chord implicitly. If you notice though, this voicing is pretty much impossible to play on one hand. This is why I will also show you two other voicings. This closed voicing is very useful if you're going to be improvising with your other hand. Of course, if we've got a closed voicing, we can always find an open one. But as I just said, when you've got the jazz chord, why not add just another note on top of it? In this case, I would recommend adding the sharp 11th. This is what this sounds like. Now, admittedly, this is a very dissonant chord, and you can't really use it in all situations. However, it can add a lot of interest to your music, so be sure to experiment around with it. Also, if you notice, this chord is very interesting because there's another way to construct it. Just have the C minor triad, and we stack the B minor triad on top of it. So, as a general idea, we can just play a minor triad, let's say F minor, and add the minor triad, which is one semitone below it, which would be E minor. I'm going to quickly show you how you could use this in context. That was all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this ultimate guide to the minor major chord. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to post a comment below, and it would really help if you subscribed and liked this video. See you next time.